it off to Jerome. Thank you again for joining with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. So I have a few things I'd like to do. I'll tell you a little bit about myself to start with. I'm a jazz musician. I play saxophone. I moved to the US from France in '93, went to Berklee College of Music in Boston for 2 years. In '95, I moved to New York, where I have been living for 30 years, 30 plus years now. Basically, my interest in recording really came, and my interest in reproduced sound and my journey to kind of becoming somewhat of an audiophile and starting a record label all stemmed from playing music and from playing the saxophone. Because one thing that's always been really important to me as a musician is sound. So even from like a fairly young age, I was working pretty hard on my saxophone sound, and that was always like a big preoccupation of mine. And getting the sound I wanted out of the instrument was something that I worked on a lot, and that I still work on a lot. Over the years, when came the time to record, I started learning about how to do that, and I sought out engineers and studied recording methods, starting with the records that I like to listen to. So at the time, this was like '90s, early 2000s, I ended up figuring out that a lot of my favorite modern recordings were done by recording engineer James Farber, who did a lot of work with Michael Brecker, Brad Meldau, John Schofield, Joe Lovano, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mark Turner. So a lot of the music that I was listening to was recorded by James. So when the time came to do my first record under my name in 2004, I called him up, and it really kind of started this whole thing for me, because he suggested recording to tape, even though we were in the CD era, and I didn't press vinyl for a long time after that. We still recorded to tape, and then that's kind of what made it onto the CDs, and that was kind of like the seed of what I'm doing today. So I learned a lot about microphones, rooms, figuring out how to get the sound that I wanted, because I was working really hard on the saxophone sound, and I was writing music for specific people, and having a band sound was important from a musical standpoint. And so it also became important to try to figure out a way to reproduce that and get it as convincingly as we could onto back then a CD, and now onto vinyl. So James taught me a lot, and I owe him a lot. I want to give him credit for a lot of what I'm doing today, because we're still working together. And the blueprint that I'm using essentially comes in no small part from him. So basically, what I believe in terms of sound and recording specifically jazz music, but I also think this applies to any type of group that can convincingly play together in a room. So something where you'd go to a live performance and essentially everybody's playing together. How to get that on record, whether it's actually a live performance or whether it's in a studio, still people are playing live. So for all my recordings and everybody we record at Analog Tone Factory, we record everybody in the same room. Now, this may seem obvious, but it's actually not, because most records that I do as a side person, if someone hires me to play on their record, usually, I think all the records I've done as a side person, I don't think I've ever been in a room with the rest of the band. I think I've always been in a booth. Sometimes I've been in a booth with the drummer or with another band member. But basically, if you're a quartet or a quintet, there's at least 3 booths. So that means everybody's hearing themselves through headphones. And the reason we do that is so the engineer and the producer can get more control And the musicians also have more control in a way, because if you make a mistake, if you're in a booth and you're the only instrument in a booth, you can redo it. So let's say you don't like the way you play the melody, you can redo the melody. You don't like your solo, you can redo your solo. And that's why people do it. Now, it comes from pop music and it comes from multi-track recording, which started with tape in the 60s, like the Beatles were like kind of pioneers of that, but they were bouncing stuff. So it was like 4-track, 8-track, then 16 tracks. By the time the digital era came, we have an unlimited number of tracks, and we can do whatever we want digitally, which is very convenient, but which is also, in my opinion, somewhat of a trap, because then you do all these things and it ends up, in my opinion, sounding rather unnatural and sometimes having limitations, and trying to capture the music as you play it live. I think it's a better way, and that's what everybody did in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and up to, you know, the 70s in a way. So to come back to the boost thing, I think it's a really, regardless of whatever format you record to, just the fact that you record all in a room already separates a band who does that from a band who doesn't. And already your recording is going to sound different, because when you play all in a room, everybody hears themselves naturally. So from a musical standpoint, from like a just trying to play music together standpoint, that's a lot better, because we get a chance to balance each other out naturally. We hear each other naturally. We have real dynamics in the room. If the drummer plays loud, the drummer plays loud. I'm going to react and do something that makes sense with what he or she is doing. We're going to play together. Now, if you hear yourself through headphones, not only do you have headphones, but usually these days in the good studios, and it's pretty standard now, you have a little, you know, tiny box on the side, and you can mix whatever you want in your headphones. And people do, which means I'm playing the saxophone, I got to hear the other people. So I got to make sure I got enough bass, I got to make sure I got enough drums, et cetera, et cetera. So I might crank up the bass. I might turn down the drums if the drummer is playing really loud, or if he's really loud in my headphone. And everybody does that, which means you got 4 different people in 4 different rooms, basically having their own little mix, so they can hear themselves and they can hear the rest of the band. What that means to me is that there are no dynamics. There is no real kind of band dynamic, because everybody's in a different place and everybody's already listening to different things. So that makes it really hard to capture the sound of a band and to make music together, because everybody's already starting, before we record anything, we're already starting from like a wildly different perspective. Everybody's hearing different things. So that to me is a problem to start with. And it's almost like an ethical problem in a way. It's kind of like, well, it's like you're trying to make music, but you're really putting yourself, when you think about it, in a much harder position to do so. So it makes sense if you're gonna play super complex music that like needs to be executed perfectly, and you can't necessarily pull it off in the moment, so you need 5 takes to do it, and maybe you need to like redo something 5 times to get it, and maybe it's the type of composition that requires that. But to play the type of music that I like to play, which is basically standards based, or even the music I write, my original music, doesn't have generally such a level of complexity that it needs that. It's much more important for us to be playing in the room like we do live all the time, like we play in clubs or concert halls or whatever, wherever it is that we play. That gives us a lot more of a chance to sound good to start with. And if we can play together and sound good together to start with in a room, then we have a shot at getting at least some of that onto whatever medium it is that we choose to record at. So that's the first thing that to me is like hugely important. And if I'm a leader on a record, no matter the rest of the choices, we're going to do it all in a room. But it's puzzling to me that so many people make the opposite choice, but the opposite choice is pretty much the norm at this point. I would say out of the jazz records that come out today, maybe 10 to 15% are really done all in a room. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, I was going to say there's two types of recording in the studio, isn't there? One is to capture performance, and you were talking about being able to hear each other. It's also being able to see each other, right?
Yes.
Look each other in the eyes and know what's coming up.
Yes.
The other type of recording is basically creating an artifact, a musical artifact.
Yes.
Sgt. Pepper was not done, or even like Steely Dan records were not done to perform live. They were
Yes.
done to create something that would then go out and be
Yes.
sold and appreciated. But it's a whole different kind of thing what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying there are types of music that recording in booths and doing things 20 times is appropriate for. And I'm not against that. It's like there's tons of great pop records are done that way. But for what I do and the type of music I gravitate towards, that is different. And I think capturing the live performance in a way that's the best possible and that a listener sitting on, here on a good system can relate to, that's what I'm trying to do. And for jazz, like all the great jazz records of the 50s and 60s were done that way. So specifically for jazz music, where there's a lot of like interaction, there's a lot of stuff that happens when people play together, I think that's important. That's not to say that if you're doing a pop record, you should be doing the same, because it'd be hugely impractical to do for a pop record. So yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, yes.
So, given that you're using the booth, in my mind, it seems like you could be doing it two ways. All the other players are in their booths and playing at the same time, or you're in your booth listening to a recording of the other players. So, do both of those happen, and what percentage?
Both of these things happen. Usually for jazz records, people will still play together at the same time in booths, but then a lot of re-recording and editing and punching will happen, where like after a take, typically somebody will go, hey, I kind of messed up the beginning of my solo, or I need to fix something in the head out. And then you're listening to the recording of what you just did, and you're punching in another track on Pro Tools, and you're playing again your part. So there's even if you start from a place where everybody's playing at the same time, there is like, that's a very common thing to do. Like that's routine at this point. So that happens on every record you listen to.
The other thing that I was wondering about, maybe this gets back more to microphones and sort of setup, but you have audience, which has to be brought in somehow, and live performance, it's there, and it's just a matter of getting the right microphone positioning and maybe blending, and the engineer on the board is going to work that out. But the other thing also that I was wondering about is the timing. I mean, some things are sometimes off. So you have to bring everything back into the right timing. I know, like, the famous Miles Davis album, how they had to go back in and work on some of the tracks because the I don't know whether it was a time lag or something to do with the tape machines or something, they were off. And so you have now re-recordings or remixing a lot of these albums simply because the pieces were done at a later time and they were done on different machines and all that.
Yeah, I think this thing you're talking about with Miles is on Kind of Blue. There's one track that was recorded at the wrong speed, or one of the machines was recording like either fast or slow.
Sort of like lip sync problem.
Yeah, and somebody figured that out in the early 2000s, and they went back and played the tape at the right speed. But that's relatively uncommon, and that's a more like after the fact kind of thing. So to come back to kind of the blueprint of recording for someone like me, that room thing is really kind of fundamental. Then the other thing that I started doing, early 2000s was recording the tape, and that was James's suggestion. And he was like, if we do it the tape, we could do it live to 2-track. Now, live to 2-track means that the mix is done direct. So that means like whatever moves you're going to do on the board, like more saxophone, less drums, more guitar, they're done live. Now,
No fixes.
no fixes, no mixing fixes. So James is excellent at that. That's what the engineers of the past, of the 50s and 60s, were doing. If you listen to a Rudy Van Gelder recording, that's what's going on. If you listen to a Columbia recording, that's what's going on. If you listen to a Roy Denon, Howard Halser recording on contemporary, that's what's going on. Like they were mixing live. Now, James is really good at that, and that's something that I also connect to, because in a way, when you're mixing a record, if you're mixing it after the fact, you're trying to recreate what happened in the room. Now, a really good engineer can do that, but it's one step removed. You're listening to it a month later, and you're trying to figure out what the music is about. If you're there in the moment and you can see the musicians play in the control room and you get the energy of the music, in a way, if you can pull it off, if you have the skills to do that, I think it's almost better. I think, because it might be less precise in a way. There might be little things that you wish you had done differently. There's always going to be some variation from track to track. You might listen to something and be, oh, I wish I had put the saxophone slightly up or slightly down, but you're going to get in the musical ballpark and you're going to get the intention of the music. And I would argue that like that's actually more important than a perfect mix. Like when James does like a live mix, it's like 90% perfect for me. Like there might be some things on some tracks where it'd be like, oh, this or that would have been better. But if we did it after the fact, we might not get it even kind of fundamentally as good. So that's another thing, you know.
Engineer part of the band, really.
Exactly. I was going to say that actually. That makes the engineer essentially part of the band. So if you got the right engineer and you got the right room, then that's something that I think is very valuable. Yes.
So it's also intrinsically one generation of tape-less.
Yes. Absolutely. It's one generation of tape-less, and it's also one generation of mixing board-less. Because if you record, let's say, to multi-track tape, then it's 2-inch. You got 16 tracks or 24 tracks. These days, generally 24, but like whatever. So once you do that, you've recorded your 16 tracks either through a board or through preamps, and it's on your 2-inch tape. Now you got to play back your 2-inch tape on a tape machine. That's got to get into a mixing board with all the electronic circuitry, and then you're going to narrow that down to stereo, left and right, do your mix through your mixing board, and print that to another tape machine. So yes, you know, if you got a great tape machine and if you got a great mixing board, some of that can be beneficial, but it's definitely one big more step removed from the microphone. So that's another reason to go live to 2-track, and that's another reason why we do it. Yes, absolutely. So I found early in the process that I was really comfortable with Live 2.2, because also it makes people play kind of differently. So now, because the expectation is like, oh, we can fix everything, we can be in booth, we can do this, there's a kind of like relaxed, laissez-faire attitude about recording where, you know, I'm in a recording session and like people are on their phones or just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, all right, let's play now. And it's like kind of like, to me, recording is like, it's like a gig. It's like, you know, it's important. It's like something that's going to stay. It's like, I kind of take it seriously and I want to do the best I can. So I also would rather have the attitude of like, okay, guys, no fixes, no editing. We're going live to 2. Now we gotta step up and play. I think it makes people play differently. Now, some people don't like the pressure of that, and maybe some people get either overshoot or undershoot and get tentative or whatever, but I'd rather have those kind of problems than, oh, let's just kind of do whatever and then we'll put it together in the mix. So that's also, in my mind, that's beneficial musically, which is a big reason to do it.
Yeah, a lot of the really great albums that I've listened to have multiple takes.
Yes.
on lot, and sometimes one person will like one, even the guys who are in the band will say, I like that take versus this one, but they're coming from a different perspective, which is interesting.
Yes, so you still can do that with, what we do. In fact, we do multiple takes. Like typically, you'll do a take, and unless it's like super great and you feel so strongly about it that you're like, okay, this is it, we're not going to redo it, which happens, and it's happened on some of my records where I felt that strongly that I didn't want to redo it. Like, so the new record that's called Stand Up, there's at least one track where it was like that, where we did it and I was like, this is it, we're not doing this again. Typically you do 2 or 3 takes, unless the music is super complex, which generally mine is not compared to what people are writing these days. I don't usually do more than 3 takes because I think it gets worse. I think you kind of lose the energy and the vibe. But there are exceptions. Also, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It depends. So then you pick, and either the producer picks or the main artist picks, or we talk together and we figure it out. Like we're in the process of doing that for 2 records that my label produced, and it's a give and take. Like I'm in touch with Mark Turner, who's a great saxophone player, whose record we did in December, and he's emailing me, and he's like, I like this take, I like that take, and I'm like, well, I like that too. Would you mind checking out this take? And then we figure it out. Now, another thing you can still do, even with tape and even with Live to 2, is you can edit takes together. So you can take, not always, but often, you can take the beginning of take 1, and let's say you take the head in and the sax solo, and then you're like, oh, the guitar solo on take 3 is really so good, it'd be a shame not to have it. Then you can splice it together with take 3. Now, I don't love doing that, but sometimes I do that because there are cases in which it really makes the music better and it really makes the record better. So I'm not such a purist that I will decide never to do that. I will do that if I really think it makes for a better record. But also, where tape is different is that to do that on tape is not easy. Like you're literally got to slice the tape with a razor blade in exactly the right spot and then tape, your first half and your second half together. So if you have the right spot and you know exactly what to do, it's doable, but essentially something that would take you 2 minutes to do in Pro Tools, which is like the digital workstation that everybody uses, it'll take you 2 hours. So you got to have a really good reason to do it. And actually, to me, that's also beneficial because then it means, yeah, if you have a compelling musical reason to do that, then you do it. But you don't do it 16 times per record or 50 times per record, which is what people do in digital. And I think a lot of the reason why, to me, some of the digital records and some of the newer jazz productions end up sounding kind of perfect and kind of great in a way, but also kind of stale and kind of weird in another way, is because people do that all the time. Because it's so easy now in Pro Tools. You can be like, hey, actually that drum fill, like, why don't we move it a little bit? So you could put it like half a second before, and then, oh, that saxophone note, yeah, it's not completely in tune. Why don't we tune it up a little bit? And then why don't we take this note from that take? I mean, people do that like all the time, Same with classical music now, that you record things like 10 seconds by 10 seconds and you piece them together. So again, that's got its place. And if you're looking to do like a super produced like pop record, singers will do words like 100 times and then piece it all together. Like
What you're saying is no auto-tune.
No what?
No auto-tune.
No auto-tune. Like, so, it's the fact that you're on tape also helps you because you got to have a good reason to make those edits. And I think that's a healthy threshold to have. Now, the other reason to be on tape, and this is, maybe going to be controversial. I'm not sure that everybody agrees on that, but to me, it really does sound better. So it's like every time we do a live to two, we record it to tape, and we usually have a digital backup. And in fact, for the latest records we've done, we have a tape machine that we got completely redone from the 60s. So it's like a tube tape machine. It's an Ampex 351, and it was converted to half-inch 30 IPS operation. So 2 tracks on half-inch is about the nicest kind of tape format you can have.
What kind of tape formulation are you using?
Right now we're recording to ATR master tape. So there's not a lot of choice. It's ATR master tape, SM900 or SM911 at this point. On our machine, we can't really use 900 because we don't have enough bias to erase it. So we can use 911 or ATR, and we prefer the sound of ATR, so we use ATR. Now we may get it modified so we can use SM900, you know, but so far ATR has served us well. We also really like the sound of it on the recording side. So we do that. But so half-inch 30, yeah, go ahead. Sorry?
What's the difference in the sounds? What is it about it?
It's pretty subjective, but like to me, compared to 911, like ATR sounds a little more real. Like the noise floor is a little lower that I can remember. Like it feels it's a film stock kind of thing. It's a good analogy. It's kind of like it's got a kind of color that I like better. You know, the other thing I'm gonna say is like tape has a color, but digital does too. Like everything has a color. So it's like when I hear people say like tape or vinyl is more color than digital, I personally don't think that's true. I think everything has a different set, different color. And so it becomes what do you like and what do you think is more musical? Yes.
Speaking of color, when you are also running digital in parallel, are you going to DSD in that case, or?
So I started getting into DSD, but you can't really record easily to DSD. You can put 2 mics up and you can record, but you can't really edit or manipulate things easily. So what I've done now is DSD, and on the Analog Tone Factory website, we now sell DSD files. What we've done is take the finished product, the master tape, and digitize that with DSD 256. So that's what we've done. Usually when we're in the studio, nobody has DSD. So what we usually do is we have the tape recorder, our Ampex running, then we usually have the studio's tape recorder running as well to have an analog backup. Because for me, given that the label is predicated on analog sound, if something craps out with the tape recorder, I need a backup because that's what I'm selling. You know, so at Power Station, where we've done the last few records, they have a Studer A820. So usually that's running. And actually on that machine, we use SM900 because we like the sound of that on that machine. So we've got the Ampex running, we've got the Studer running, and usually we also have a straight digital running that is strictly like backup to the backup, but we usually have that. And everything is at either 96 or 192, because another thing we'll do is we'll do a bounce from the tape recorder directly. So a tape recorder has a record head and a play head. So when you put your tape up, you record, and then it's going to the play head, so you can hook it up where you get an instant digital backup of your tape. And that's really convenient to pick takes. You know, because then we have everything on the computer, we pick takes of the digital, and then we edit the tape, and we send it to Bernie Grunman to cut the record and do the real digital versions. But so I have a bunch of files on my computer where I have 9624 or more recently 19224 files made from tape recorder number 1, tape recorder number 2, and straight digital. So one thing I was thinking we might get into today at some point is I can play you the exact same thing on file from the Ampex, the Studer, and the digital, and you can hear the difference for yourselves. So that's one thing we can do because I brought that today. Now the differences are not trivial to me. Sorry, go ahead. Or somebody wanted to say something?
Any
Yes.
problem with tape stock? I understand a lot of tape stock.
Yeah, we do have problems with tape stock. Like we've had bad batches,
Yeah.
and it's happened that we had to send some back, and it's happened that we had to scramble to get some tape to the session last minute. It's happened on the Chris Cheek record and my record Stand Up. Like we had the studio booked for 3 days, and we had a really bad batch of tape, and we had to get other tape in. Yeah.
No, Cookie Marenko here in the Bay Area.
I know the name, but no.
Records DST and analog.
Yeah.
She's taken to recording the whole reel to make sure the tape is good before they do the session.
Yeah, so we don't do that, but like basically if you can align the tape, so when you record the tape, you're printing tones. You're printing 5 tones usually. So 1K, 10K, 16K, 50 hertz, 100 hertz. So if you can print the tones and they say steady through a reel, which is 16 minutes at 30 IPS, and you look at your meters, and if the meters go like this, that's not good. If the meters are steady and everything is holding, then usually you don't have a problem. Now the other thing is you got to clean your heads because there's oxide that gets on the heads, so you got to clean those. Like we basically record a reel or two, then we clean the heads, then we start again. So that's kind of the routine that you have to do. Yes.
Sorry, I may have misunderstood you, but you're actually printing tones at the beginning and the end of the recording session and checking them against each other?
No, we're printing tones at the beginning, but when we're checking a batch of reels, let's say I usually get 18 reels per record. So we will usually pull out 4 and we'll print tones for the duration of the reel. And we make sure that they hold.
I see.
Because what can happen with a bad batch is like you start printing your tone, but 5 minutes later, you're 2 dBs down or 3 dBs down. And then you've got a problem because that means your EQ is not steady, and that means everything is going to get messed up.
Right. You talked about you don't see this, but don't you have a little bit of inherent wobbliness at 16K?
Yeah, you're going to have a little bit, but like I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being 2 or 3 dBs down, like a big kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's happened,
Yeah.
you know, like, and then you have a problem because if you record your album like that, you know, you can't use it, or the EQ is going to change throughout the whole thing, and that means your mastering engineer isn't going to be able to do a good job because he's going to have nothing to go on, you know.
Makes sense why you would use 2 different tape stocks during your.
Also, that's also why I do that. I figure, okay, let's say I get a bad batch of ATR, you know, hopefully I won't get both a bad batch of ATR and a bad batch of SM900, you know. Yes.
On the microphone side of
Yes.
this, are there particular mics that work particularly well with certain types of instruments or?
Yes. Yeah, yes. Like, and that's a big part of it. You know, like another thing that like the great engineers do is like they'll know to put up the right mic on the right person at the right distance in the right place. And if you do that, then you're much less reliant on EQ. Like James Farber will usually, he's not adverse to using EQ, but he'll try not to. He'll try to put a mic that he picked, you know, in the right place, and he'll try to do it that way. And if he doesn't like what's coming out, he'll switch the mic before he goes to EQing it. So that's a big part of it. So for example, when we did this record, you know, that was the first time that I recorded at Power Station, and we put up 3 saxophone mics. And in the beginning we picked, and it was like there was a Telefunken 251, there was a Neumann U47, and there was an RCA 44. So 3 great mics that are very different mics.
Did you have a particular favorite?
Yeah, Telefunken 251, that's what's on the record. Yeah. And I hesitated. I liked the 44, but the 44 sounded older, woollier, maybe a little too dark. I liked it, but I didn't think it won. Then the 251 and the 47 were both great. And in fact, I picked the 47 first. And then we did a take with the band. And we always listen to the first playback because that's your opportunity to hear everybody together. And I thought I preferred the 47 on the saxophone alone, and maybe I did. But when I listened back with bass and drums, I switched. I was like, actually, this is not blending the way I wanted to with the rest, and I'm not loving this. Let's go back to the 251. And then we did the same, tune, and I listened to that again, and I was like, yeah, I'm picking the 251. So sometimes it's also about how the mics are going to interact together. Yes.
Does anybody do direct-to-disc anymore, or have you looked at that?
It's rare, but people do it. Yeah, it's rare. It's one more layer of risk and being super prepared. And yeah, I've never done it. I'd be curious to do it, but that then you require a lathe. It's like a whole other. What we do is already really difficult. So this is like a whole other layer, But yeah, I think there's still some people doing that. Yes.
Cut off the front of the tape. You can't cut off the front of the record.
No.
From the time you decided to start your label, and you said, we're going to do this, you and your engineer buddy, what was that time process? How long did that take you to actually put it together, whether it's funding or whatever, and to get the right components and tape it ready?
Okay, right components. My label partner, Pete Randy, already had an Ampex 351, but his was quarter-inch, 7.5, 15 IPS. I had done a bunch of records to half-inch tape, 30 IPS, using studio machines, so usually an ATR 102, which is a solid-state 70s, 80s machine. Ampex. We decided that we'd like to have both the quality of the more high-resolution format of half-inch 30, but also the nicer tube electronics of the Ampex 351. So that sent us on a quest to accomplish that. And we knew it could be done because there's a label called Connoisseur Society where, David Jones did a lot of recordings. Now, David Jones is the guy who not only did those recordings, but he also recorded the famous Bill Evans Live at the Vanguard. And we know, because it's on some of these records, that some of these records were done to an Ampex 350, which is the same thing as a 351, but with different tube electronics. And we know they were done at 30 on half-inch tape. So we know that there was a way that they did it. We didn't know what that was. And there are no technical blueprints in the Ampex papers that tell you how to do it technically, because 30 IPS is a different EQ than 15 IPS. So we had to find a way to essentially reverse engineer that, which is technically beyond certainly what I could even think about. And my partner, Pete, is good at this kind of stuff, but not on that level. So we needed somebody really high level to modify an Ampex 351 tube electronic circuit to achieve the correct EQ at 30 IPS half-inch. And we found somebody who was willing to do it. John Chester, who was like a great tape tech, and he did it for us. But it wasn't easy. Like, it took, between that and getting the transport correct, that took us about 2 years to get that done. Because the transport is also super important. Like an Ampex 351 transport is primitive compared to like a modern 80s transport. But it can be set in a way that is really, if you get it all right and you get the components right and you set it just perfectly, then it can be really great. So for example, the specs on there's wow and flutter on tape, like there is on vinyl. So you got to get those specs as low as you can, because otherwise your tape speed isn't constant and as accurate as you want it to be. So our transport beats the Ampex tape specs by quite a bit, So we are closer to like a modern transport in terms of wow and flutter, but we also have what I think are considerably nicer sounding electronics.
How many of those machines do you own?
One. But with a lot of backup parts,
It never travels, right?
It does travel, but like we take it in the car, we bring it to the studio, we bring it back. But I wouldn't ship it. But we do take it to the studios that we work at. So it does travel, but it's a big production. So at this point, so that took some time. Now the logistical stuff, I basically, for the last 10 years, I started doing vinyl in 2013, and the label officially started 2.5 years ago. But for the last 10 years, essentially, I was doing things as if the label was mine for the vinyl part. I had a deal with Sunnyside Records where I would license the digital to them, and they would deal with that. And I would put out the analog myself and be in charge of all that. So essentially, for the last 10 years, I was doing the analog part anyway. So when the time came to do it all, in a way, it was an easy transition because I was already doing it. And it was just a matter of like getting the label name together and then figuring out the digital distribution, because, we made the choice that we wanted the music to be wildly available. So we decided it's not going to be just a vinyl label. It's going to be a vinyl label, but we're also going to have the digital because we want people to listen to it. And even though we're not going to make any money of the digital, because you don't, we still want to have CDs and we still want to have streaming. And now we're going to do, we're doing DSD. We'll see if that works or not. But like, we want the music to be available for everybody in the formats that they listen to.
Were you using your Franken machine for your records prior to?
No, the first record that this machine is used on is Vintage, which is still on Sunnyside. And that's a bit of a hybrid because it's the only multi-track tape record that I've done. What happened is Vintage was done during the pandemic, and James Farber, who was supposed to engineer it, didn't want to work during that time because he didn't feel comfortable. So I ended up recording with a different engineer, but because I didn't really trust anybody to do a live to 2-track but James, I did multi-track tape. And then my label partner, Pete, and I mixed it, and we mixed it to that Ampex, so to the Ampex 351. And the record after that is Heart, it's this one. That's the first one that was done live to the Ampex. And then we kept doing that.
Can you tell a difference tonally in your mind between the two?
Yeah, but also Vintage was in a different studio, different microphones, different board. All that stuff matters. All that stuff is gonna make it different. Another interesting comparison is like if you listen to my new record Stand Up, and if you listen to Heart, and if you listen to Chris Cheek's record Keepers of the Eastern Door, they're all done in the same room, and they're all done to that machine. The sax mic is the same on all three records, yet there are significant differences because maybe humidity that day is such that the room starts, sounds a certain way, the board, whatever happens, it's like, there's an element of like, this is what's happening on this day to making a record like that. So it's something that works great one day might not be. It's also not a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of like miking or or in terms of like, you put, let's say, you put a certain mic in front of a bass player, it sounds great for him. Somebody has a different bass, it might not sound good on them. So it's not as simple as like, this is the mic I like on bass. It's like you can say, like, I know this mic works well on this bass with that person playing it. And if you're lucky, that's gonna hold the next time you record that person on that bass in that room. But it's not necessarily gonna hold with a different bass player in the same room. For example, we did back-to-back Chris Cheek's record and my record. And so it's a different cast of musicians. Saxophone mic is the same, bass mic is different, drums overhead are different. Like the drums overhead that worked for my record, we felt weren't really capturing the drummer on Chris Cheek's record, so we switched them, you know? So it's like you gotta listen and you gotta try to make the best judgment calls you can. Yes?
On the previous example where after the first take you wanted to switch microphones.
Mm-hmm.
So how many microphones did you switch? Do you have 10 of each kind of microphone?
No, I mean, there's literally one Telefunken 251 at Power Station. It's a pretty unique mic. It's old. So is the U47. So we had different types of mic. There was only one of each. And we just decided we liked the 251 over the U47.
Which player?
On me.
Okay, on you.
Yeah.
Okay, and the rest of the band?
Different mics. Yeah, different mics. Yeah.
251 a small diaphragm?
No, large diaphragm. Large condenser. So is the U47. Yeah. So 251 is to me is a little, it's got like these like soft, like kind of silky highs, and it captures the high end really, really well. It's maybe a little less beefy than a 47. I'm sure there's sax players on which a 47 would be better. And in fact, I've used one on my first record, Norse, that's a 47. And so, you know, it depends what people have and what sounds the best to you in that room. Maybe with the reed I had. I mean, it's different every time. But I have done Heart on that mic, Stand Up on that mic. Chris's record is on that mic. The new Mark Turner record we did, we try to beat that mic. We put up, again, a 47, a 67, the 251, and a modern copy of the 251. And that same 70-year-old 251 won, and that's on that record too.
As you said, for age.
Yeah, well, we're finding it hard to beat, you know. So
it works for multiple styles of playing.
so far, yes. I mean, for on those 3 records or those 4 records, we haven't been able to beat it so far. You know.
Being in a kitchen and eating the
So
right
thanks.
spices.
Yep.
Thanks for mentioning reeds. I wanted to ask, so how much do you play with reeds to get the sound you want?
Well, if I show up to a gig, I'll use whatever I had on there before if it still sounds good. If I feel it doesn't, I'll pull out 1 or 2, which Robert saw me do this yesterday, and I'll play them for like a few minutes, and I'll pick the 1 out of 3 that sounds the best. And usually, my reeds are pretty consistent. I play like an old brand. They're pretty easy to play. They're not fancy, and they're pretty consistent. Now, when I record, I hold myself to a higher standard, and I want to make sure I'm really happy because it's there forever. So I might go through 5 or 10 reeds unless I find one that I feel really good about. If I find one I feel really good about, then I try to get a backup in case it starts not feeling good at the session. So usually if I'm recording, I'll have a number 1 choice that I feel really good about, and I'll have a backup in case it dies on me or something.
So how does the difference between reeds compare to the difference between microphones?
At least as much.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like, everything matters. And the same with cymbals, same with like guitar amps, same with everything. So it starts with us on the musical side. You know, you gotta like, if people's sounds are really together, if people can play really well as a band, then it's easier to record. Like it's much easier to record a band that can balance itself out, that can play together well, than it is to record a band that's all over the place. So it starts with that, for sure. That's a big, that's a huge, it's the most important part of it, really, you know. All right, let's come back to my little blueprint of recording, all in a room, tape, not a lot of manipulation. Basically, try to put the mic in the right place and, keep it simple. But simple, high level, so like with like super fancy mics and a really nice sounding room is really important. And then keeping things, not messing up what you have, like sending it to a mastering engineer that's gonna have a really high level tape player and cut a record without doing a bunch of stuff to it, which Bernie Grunman is, really great, and he's been great to work with. I did my first record with Doc Sax in 2013, and then I did everything else with Bernie, and he's been great. And usually, what we do on that end is I ask him to do one transfer of one song straight, meaning no EQ, no nothing. And then I ask him to do his best shot at EQ. And then I pick. And there are records in which I pick no EQ. And there are records that I produce, usually not my records, but some stuff that I've produced for other people where, I think what he's done with EQ is better. And so that ends up being the record. And because everything is recorded in a room over 1 day or 2 days, usually track to track, it's consistent enough that whatever works on one track, whether it's EQ or no EQ, ends up working on the whole record. And that's been kind of how we work together for these records. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, to go back to mics. Could you talk about the other mics that you use for different instruments?
Yeah. Often on bass, it's going to be, James likes to do a combination of condenser and ribbon. So that's what's on Heart, for example. On Joe Martin on Heart, there's like 1/2 of a C24. A C24 is an AKG stereo large diaphragm condenser mic. Yeah, so because we don't want it in stereo, we just hook up one capsule and we use it in mono. Yeah, like a C12, exactly. So that's that, and there was also a RCA 77, and James blended the two. On drums, usually James likes to multi-mic. So there's like overheads, maybe 2 overheads left and right, 1 in the center, and then there's mics on every drum. That's the more modern approach. I think he's extremely good at it, and in fact, he's kind of the only guy that I know who can still get something that's like, to me, feels like a natural drum sound by using that approach. But we're actually kind of going away from that approach a little bit, and for the last record, quartet record that we did, which is not out yet, which is Mark Turner's record, which we did in December, we used a different approach and we used a lot fewer mics. And one of the reasons we did that is we also used a different board. We now have a tube board, which is an Altec 250 SU board, and that's got 10 channels. So a lot of times, like you would, it's not much compared to a modern board. Sometimes you'd put 10 channels just on drums, So because we had this, we used a lot fewer mics on drums, and we try to like kind of do what the older engineers were doing and use just 1 or 2, or overhead, bass drum, maybe snare, But usually the overheads on the drums is what makes the sound. So that's what, even on a multi-mic recording from James, like that's mostly the overheads you're hearing. And on this record, it's like they're modern Sheps, they're like CMC 6 on this record. On the Chris Cheek record on Rudy Royston, that's Neumann KM54s. And let's see, guitar, James is like different things on different people. On stand up, that on Ben Monder, that's a Sony C37A and a Coles 4038. So blend of ribbon and condenser on that too. Yes.
So the room, as it used to be, was the key to getting a good drum kit to work well. The room you were dealing with.
Room is key to everything.
Yeah. So it still is in your case, but in modern parlance is you're relying as much upon the mic and mic positioning and all that.
Yes.
When I talked to, years ago, when I talked to Keith Johnson, who was
Yeah.
obviously focused more on big orchestral stuff, he was playing all kinds of interesting games with mic positions way above, depending upon the space he was in.
Yeah.
Jazz is probably maybe less complex, I don't know.
Well, yes and no, because like, for example, I think one of the reasons the Van Gelder stuff sounds so good is I think that room is exceptional. Power Station C, where we've done this record and the two after, it's a great sounding room. Like, so that's really important. Like for the types of records we make, we need that. Because you're going to get the sound of the room because every mic is bleeding into each other. It's all like, it's like cooking. It's like doing, you a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. It all has to work together, and the room is a big part of it. So some rooms are super dry. If it's really dry, it might be hard to play in as a saxophone player. Now, if it's too wet, there's too much reverb, it's going to get really uncontrolled. If the drummer plays loud, it's going to get really hard to record. So you kind of want something in the middle that it feels good to play in, and you can still control it, So yeah, room is super important, for those type of recordings.
I don't know if this was asked before. What's your favorite studio monitor to listen to try to interpret what's going to go on to your record?
That's a really hard one. We're basically mostly dependent on what the studios we go to have. So for example, at Power Station, they're using, in C, they're using ATC 45s now, but James doesn't like them. So he specifically requests the older Pro Axe that they have there that he's really used to. And not only does he request the Pro Axe, but he requests a particular Yamaha amp that he's used with those Pro Axe many times. And he's like, I want this amp and those monitors. So if we're recording with him in that studio, that's what we do. Now, if you're in another studio, like where we mix vintage was at Brooklyn Recording, and over there they had those ATCs, and that's what we used. We used them, and we liked them. Now at home, I used to have Rogers mini monitors, JR149. I now have Quad ESL 57s that have been kind of modified, but that's what I have. But that's on the listening end. That's not when we're mixing. So we've used different things. My label partner, Pete, has the Tanois that have been modified with the Mastering Lab crossover that Doug Sachs did. So we have those. We also now, he has a set of ADCs that we got recently, and we're probably going to use that, but like we haven't found it's kind of what it's not necessarily what's best at what everybody else is going to know, but it's kind of what in that room. So James is like, I know the sound of this Pro Axe with that amp in this control room, so I feel I can adjust things in a way that is going to translate everywhere else. Doesn't mean the Pro Axe is like the best monitors ever made. It just means he knows how it's going to sound elsewhere.
Chain you need to control.
Yes.
Something that everything.
Yeah, but there is, the thing that's hard is that, define that,
The same amplifier, the same
Yes.
engineer.
Yes.
You've got a sense of control there.
Yes, and that we have. But then, you're supposed to go to a mastering studio, and their stuff is supposed to be top of the line and accurate and precise and flat and all that. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. So it's kind of like everything is subject to interpretation. Like, I don't know how many people there are here, but like everybody's got a different system, and I'm sure everybody likes their system, at least to a point. But, probably a lot of you are listening or prefer analog to digital or digital to analog. Maybe you prefer open baffle speakers, maybe you prefer box speakers, maybe you prefer planar or whatever. So it's kind of like maybe you prefer mini monitors, maybe you prefer full range, maybe you use a sub, maybe you don't use a sub. It's kind of like, I don't know that there's going to be a universal thing that is going to be across the board better than everything else.
So is headphones not an option? Because that could be universal. You could always take your headphones.
Yeah, but headphones is going to make you, is a good check, and we do use headphones, but I prefer, and we in general prefer, mixing for speakers and let the headphones be a check. Like, headphones are different because your left to right are closed. So it's a different thing. It's hard to get a sound stage on headphones and that's hard to gauge. So, and as someone who doesn't listen to headphones all the time, I also don't feel super comfortable making decisions just based on headphones. Also, different headphones do different things. You get into headphone amps, you get into all that kind of thing. So yeah, I do have a pair of headphones, a couple of pair of headphones. I take them to the studio and I use them to check stuff, and it is useful, but I wouldn't want to be reliant just on that, personally. Yes.
Back to where you started, my impression is that a lot of musicians don't really concern themselves with the sound quality in the studio, the home. And you run into a lot of that, or is there enthusiasm like yours? For a lot of musicians, a few, none, for some of the instrument.
There is, like, people try to get a good sound, but like, a lot of musicians don't care that much. They care about the music and they care about maybe their own sound, but like, they're not necessarily as sensitive to that part of thing because, as musicians, we can hear through stuff. So it's like, even if I'm on a shitty system, like, I can still hear the music through that, and I can still enjoy the music through that. Like, it might not be the ultimate audiophile experience, but I can still get into the music. And I think musicians, we tend to be that way because we hear the music, and so I don't necessarily think a lot of musicians have even heard like a great system. And some people are really into it, like Billy Drummond is a great drummer. Like, he's an audiophile. He's got like 6 systems in his house, like 1 in each room, like 3 big ones and 3 small ones. Peter Washington is into it. I know musicians who are into it, but I think it's fair to say that the majority of musicians are not. And also, with recording also, there's a certain standard now where you do it digital, you do it in booth, it's got a certain sound. At mastering, it gets compressed a ton. So in my mind, mostly for worse, we're like, industry standard jazz recording now, for example, is not something that I particularly enjoy listening to at this point in time. I'd much rather listen to a 50s or 60s recording, with some exceptions, obviously, but like the kind of standard approach where, also it's a cost thing. It's cheaper to do digital, it's cheaper to go to a less fancy studio, so you end up with a not great room, with not great mics, you do it all in the box, meaning computer, you do everything in the computer, That's not going to sound as great as like a great mixing board and outboard stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And part of it is like because you can't sell anything in digital, because everything, we've lost that battle as musicians. And as a society now, we're in a place where music is essentially free. Like, one of the reasons that I do what I do is like, I really think these records, all analog, once you put it on the vinyl, I really think it sounds better. But also, I have something to sell because there are people who are still willing to buy these records because they care about that aspect of it. And that enables me to keep working and produce music that I definitely could not produce if I was just working digitally.
You ever have issues with people you play with who don't want to be bothered with all this stuff?
No, the people I play with, they know me. They know I'm a freak with that stuff. They know what they're getting into. And if we do a record for somebody else, like if we produce somebody else's record, like Mark Turner, or we did a drum record with like 4 drummers that I'd like to play some of too, like I tell people in advance. I'm like, hey guys, we're gonna record the tape. It's going to take a little longer in the beginning. We're not going to be able to edit. It's going to be that kind of thing. And I make sure they're on board. If somebody was like, you know what, I really don't want to do it, then I wouldn't do it. But like, also we don't do that many records. Like, so it's like the people that I work with, I really want to work with them for a reason. And then I'm like, listen, this is the process. This is what we want to do. Are you cool with it? So.
Have you heard any other recordings outside of your own label that you felt were good as of late? Some other pieces?
Good question. I haven't listened to a ton of recent stuff lately, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are. Sometimes some of the more produced things in pop or whatever can be cool. It's like I enjoy some of those stuff,
What about jazz recordings?
Jazz recordings.
Mary Halverson or?
Yeah, I like. I can tell you some recordings that I really like. That's not that recent, but like, I revisited. It's probably 15, 20 years old now, but Angel Song, Kenny Wheeler was like Bill Frisell and Dave Holland and Lee Konitz. That's kind of like that's recorded in Studio C at Power Station. That's digital recording. I think that sounds fantastic. Like that's a great, I think that's a great recording. Some of the ECM stuff, it's not necessarily the way I want to record, but I really enjoy it. Like the Mark Turner, Ethan Iverson duo record, which is a few years old. I think that sounds really, really nice. Yeah.
Is there, since you're looking at the LP and it looks like it really means a lot to you because it gives you what you need, do you have any particular turntable or phono cartridge that you think gives the best representation of your stuff?
I can tell you what I have, which I like. I have a Garrar 401 that was completely redone, and I used to have a Magnipan arm, which is like an 80s arm that actually really punches above its price point. But lucky, in recent years, I got a Frank Schroeder arm, which is a pretty fancy thing. And I got a Supex 900 cartridge, which was retipped, which is like a 80s MC cartridge. Like, I really like that. I'm not sure that like, when you get into like turntable, phono stages, cartridges, all that stuff, I don't know. I think all that stuff is gonna have a sound. Your amp is gonna have a sound. Your speakers are gonna have a sound. It's all gonna have a sound. So it's like I try to get something that I know the sound of, and that's like neutral enough that I can make decisions, and detailed enough that I can make decisions. Like I can tell you, like Doug Sachs used to think, and is quoted in print as saying that he thought There were a couple of cartridges that he thought were better for his purposes than the MCs, and I think it was a Stanton, maybe the 881 or something like that. And I think like Bernie and other people in mastering still use the Shure V15.5, and they feel that's like a really good kind of clean look at things.
You don't have a Schroeder LT, do you?
I have a Schroeder CB. Yeah, I have a Schroeder CB, but I have one that he handmade. So I have the like wooden arm, and he kind of made it for my cartridge and for my turntable. Yes.
So, getting back to music and stuff like that. So you did your multi-mat track recording for one time. What do you do and to try to sound? What do you do in working with the musicians so that the result sounds like everyone's like it's of a piece? All the musicians are really together and working off each other. So when we go and listen to it, it sounds more like I would hear something in the club.
Well, first, like playing everybody in a room is a huge part of that. Setting the room up so people can hear each other is a big part of that. So one thing that's always a little bit of a give and take with those records is the bass, because if you're not going to use headphones, and I try not to use headphones even when we're in the same room, you got to be able to hear the bass. Now, if the drummer is playing kind of loud, which at some point that's going to happen, like if the bass is playing acoustically, the bass might get lost. So then you either have to use headphones, which I really don't want to do as a sax player because it really messes me up. So what we do, and this is always a give and take, is we set up tight so that people are close to each other. So there's not that a ton of distance between the players. And then we put a bass amp in the room. And we try to dial the bass so that people can hear it naturally like we would in a club. Because if we're playing in a club, usually acoustic bass is going through an amp. And that's how that works. So we do the same thing in the studio, except we don't record the amp. And then we try to position the amp so that we can hear it to play, but also so the mics don't pick it up. And so that's kind of, if we can get to a place where everybody's in the room, everybody's close enough, everybody can hear each other, then that basically accomplishes what you're talking about. And then it's about, the mics picking it up and getting the right mix to translate it to people, on the record. Does that answer your question?
Can you get the bass to sort of tamp down a bit so it sort of blends more naturally,
Or do we do that with
well, not the bass, the drums.
drums? That's with the mix. So it's like, the drums are going to be, there's going to be certain mics on the drums. And if you want the drums to be lower in the mix, then you just like tamp that down on the mixing board. That's what you would do. But hopefully we would also be in a situation where everybody balances each other out naturally. So hopefully you don't have a drummer that's going to play twice as loud as he should be, because you're going to hire somebody who knows what they're doing and is going to play in a sensitive way with what everybody else is doing.
Because of time, maybe
Oh, yeah.
we want to move on to.
Yes, sure.
Questions actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Sorry. We've been talking and talking, but okay. So there's a few things I wanted to play. You tell me what's more interesting because we may run out of time. One thing I've been getting into on the vinyl side of it is doing those things that they call one-step pressings. And it basically removes some mechanical steps to press the record. For the last two records that we've done, my record Stand Up and the Chris Cheek record, we have done it both ways. And that's interesting because it's kind of a controlled experiment, which you don't really get, because usually the one steps are like famous records that everybody wants to reissue, and they get reissued as one steps, but you don't really get to hear what the process necessarily does because you don't know what else went into it. Like, you know, it could be two different mastering engineers, it could be tapes 20 years apart. So in our case, it's done exactly the same way. And I have, for my new record, I have the normal version and I have the one-step version. And they were done exactly the same way, cut back to back by the same recording engineer, plated at the same time at the pressing plant, pressed at the same pressing plant. So it's as much as a controlled experiment as you're gonna get. So we could do that. Another thing we could do is what we talked about earlier, where I have the files from the two different tape recorders and the digital. And I think that's interesting too, because you've probably never heard something like that, and that could give you, it'd be a chance for you to hear it and kind of see what differences you hear and if you like one over the other. And, you know, I know what my preferences are. They may not be the same as yours. So where do we start? Who wants to, what's the priority here? We might, hopefully we can do both, but what are you into? Okay. All right, so let's do that. So let's switch this and let's do it. Yeah, sorry, let's pull this off. Sorry, because that was before we did the one steps. This one, so.
Go ahead and put on yours.
Yeah. So do you want to know what's what, or do you want to not know? Okay. All right. So we'll go one and two. So here's one. Which track do we want to do? Well, let's do the first track. So I can let the whole track run, or we could maybe do the head in, you know, and
We lose our perspective in playing the
whole track.
No, don't play them.
Don't play the whole track. Okay, I'm gonna play the head in, and then I'm gonna move to the other one, kind of 1 minute, 1 minute 30, or whatever it is, and then we can talk about it. Okay. I don't know where the volume is or any of this stuff. You got it. Okay. Okay, so that's one. And here's two. Thoughts? All right, okay. So let's, who prefers 1? Who prefers 2? All right, 2 is the one step, 1 is the normal. Like, I mean, it's pretty clear, right? Like, yeah,
Well, it's more musically involving, interesting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and they were done exactly the same way. So it's like, you know, I don't think that particular thing is hype. I think it's very real. And the reason I do it is because, you know, we started doing it with the Chris Cheek record, and I was curious about it, you know. And so I got the pressing plant, which didn't really want to do it, but did it to indulge me. I got them to give me test pressings both ways. And then when I listened, I was like, oh, okay, like this, you know, this is like considerably better, you know. So we kept doing it, and now I do both because, you know, it's a price point difference. It's a lot more involved to do the one step. It costs more money, all that. So I don't go with the super fancy packaging and the thing where there's like, you know, 30 pages of everything. But like, so it's essentially the same packaging, but, you know, so I've got the regular record, which is $40, and I've got the one step, which is $75. But, you know, I'm trying to keep it reasonable, and I still want to have the $40 record, you know. But to me, the one step is considerably better, you know. Yes.
So the one step, you're going from the lacquer, and you make a stamper right off of it, right?
Yes, it turns your lacquer into a stamper, essentially.
So you can't use the lacquer again, or you?
No, you can't use the lacquer again.
So you had 2 different lacquers, or did you?
Oh, I had 2 different lacquers. Yeah. And like there's no other way. It's like I need a lacquer for the 3-step, and I usually need more than 1 lacquer for the 1-step, because if anything goes wrong, you know, you still got to have it. So that means you need multiple lacquers.
Do you listen to the lacquers?
I listen to okay, what happens is Bernie Grundman cuts a lacquer just for me. I listen to that one. I approve that one. Anything else that happens after, nobody listens to, because you don't want it listened to before it goes to the pressing plant. You want it to get it plated right away. So nobody listens to those. But what I do get is test pressings after that. And I get 3-step test pressings, and I get 1-step test pressings. And sometimes I get 1-step test pressing from this lacquer, 1-step test pressing from that lacquer. And there are variations. So
How many lacquers do you usually do when you're doing the front?
at least 2 for the 1-step, 1 for the 3 steps, and sometimes 3 for the 1-step.
Like 5 or 6 altogether.
Yeah, a little less than that, or yeah, but it could be. And if you're pressing a lot of numbers, you would have to. Like if you're like MoFi or acoustics, I mean, acoustic sounds doesn't do it, I guess, but like whoever is doing 1-steps, if you want 5,000 of them, you're looking at a lot of lacquers, you know. And then you're looking at a lot of quality control on those lacquers, because that's also...
Using a stamper for it. In the old days, they did 10, 12,000 on the stamper. In the old days, in the 70s.
Yes, and you can do 1,000 of even high quality 180 grams record of one stamper if the stamper doesn't break. But the stamper might break. If the stamper might, so all right, the Chris Cheek record, all the 1-steps are from the same lacquer, and we pressed 1,000. The stamper did not break. I don't hear any, you know, to me they sound great. They sound really consistent. I'm okay with that. I was going to do the same on my record Stand Up, and I had 2 lacquers for that, but I really preferred side A on one and side B on the other, even with the 1-step. So I asked the plant to make the 1-step from this side A and that side B, but the stamper broke, so I couldn't get, you know, all of that, so I had to get another lacquer made, which I liked, and they did the rest with that. So, but also that means every time I got to do quality control on the test pressings, because you get test pressings, if they're noisy, they have ticks and pops. Let's say this happens on your 3-step. Then there's a chance they can go back, correct it on the mother, do a new stamper, and then you might be okay there.
What pressing plant are you using?
Got a Groove in Cleveland.
And so are they using new pressing?
Yeah, I think it's new machines. No, it's new machines. I'm pretty sure it's new machines. I gotta check that, but I believe it's new machines, yes. But the quality control thing is important because on a one step, let's say there's a big pop somewhere, and let's say you can't live with it. They may or may not be able to fix it, but they might not. And if they can't, then you're either looking at putting that out and living with it, or you're looking at recutting and going through the whole process again. So the one-step thing is hugely inconvenient. It's hugely impractical. It costs a lot of money. It takes a shitload of time. And, it's really difficult to do, but it is better. So it's not practical to make 10,000 record that way. And even to get 1,000 good ones out of it, which is what I'm trying to do, or 500 to 1,000 good ones, that's already not easy to do. But I'm still going to keep doing it because it's manageable if those are the numbers. It's not really manageable if it's 10,000, I don't think.
How much degradation is there for playing the tape multiple times?
Yeah, because every lacquer is another passage.
With new tape and a good tape machine, honestly, not an issue.
So you don't hear it?
No.
You have more
No.
differences in vinyl than you would.
Much more differences in yeah. Like the tape playing thing with new tape on a gentle transport, which is what Bernie Grunman has, like, maybe after 30 times you might hear something, but it's like, I haven't heard any tape degradation with new tape on any of my stuff, even when we do, for example, the DSD 256 copies, which go from the master that's being used to cut the records. Now it's being used to do the DSD transfer. I don't hear any tape degradation. Yes.
So you're going from master tape to an EQ tape, or you're taking the master running right through the console, right into the lathe?
We're going master right into console, right into tape. Like what you're hearing on these records is the master tape. There is no other master tape. It's literally, in the case of these records, it's literally the tape that we recorded on, that we edited the tunes together to make it the master. There's no other step. It's literally the tape. And then in the case of these records, there's also no mastering board because there's no EQ. So I asked Bernie to bypass the mastering board, which he can do, and that also buys you a sonic benefit because as good as this mastering board is, it has a certain sound that if you need EQ or if you need a certain kind of gelling, gluing aspect, I think his board can do that, but I like the sound better without it.
I didn't mean EQ like for I mean the reverse RAA that you have to put on there, something the bass for.
Oh.
That part of it has to go through your console, unless you did that when you're doing the master tape, which I've never actually
Yeah,
heard
no,
of.
they wouldn't do it.
Because then you wouldn't be able to use it for anything else except for records.
No, the RIAA is baked into when you do the cut. That's what happens.
Yeah, it's got to go through a console when you're going to the lathe.
It's not a console. It's like whatever box that is to make that happen. It's like a tape pre and reverse essentially, but it's not necessarily a whole console.
Okay, because I just had this conversation with Chad at Acoustic Sounds, and sometimes they do an EQ tape, they call it.
Yes.
They're doing a lot of it, especially if they're going to send it to RTI. And then sometimes they take, if it's going to be a short run, they're just going to run right through the console, right to the leg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the reason to do, I'm not sure what they're doing. I think the reason to do an EQ'd version was if you didn't want to play your master tape over and over again, and you wanted to have your EQ onto a tape so you don't have to redo it manually every time. I guess that would be the reason.
And they didn't trust the people in the remote pressing plant to do the RAA correctly, something in the bass.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if you want any moves, if you want any EQ, if you want anything, like on the big pop records or back in the day or whatever, then yeah, a lot of times there would be an intermediary step, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with the RIAA. It has to do with the EQ on the record, like more treble, less bass, like whatever.
I'm only talking about,
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm understanding you.
RAA and summing the bass when you put it into the record, which you have to do for the RAA.
Oh, summing the bass. Yeah, okay. So that's a filter, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, well,
filter EQ. They,
Yeah.
he calls it an EQ tape, I call it a cutting tape.
Yes, so you don't have to do that all the time. Like you can, some cutting engineers will mono the bass up to a certain point or that kind of thing, but some won't, like it depends, you know. And the more, like summing the bass to mono is gonna be something that's audible and that you don't necessarily wanna do unless you really have to do it. So I don't think Bernie does for my records, for example.
So you were talking earlier about 3 different.
Yeah, that we can do. So you want to do that?
That'd be great.
Okay, so, and that we can do, and then we can put on the record, which is this record. So same thing, there's going to be, or just so you know what we're listening to a digital file. Well, there's 3 digital files. One is straight up digital. One is digital made directly from the Studer A820 at Power Station. And one is a digital file made from the Ampex 351, all at the same time. Do you want to, same thing, you want to do this blind, or you want to know what's what, or what do you?
Blind up front, and then reveal.
Okay. So I would just press this.
Yeah, just press it, let's see if it works.
All right, here's one.
How about doing it once blind and doing it once seeing?
Okay, good.
Okay. All right, who likes 1? Who likes 2? Who likes 3? All right, it's kind of split decision. 1 is digital, 2 is Studer, 3 is Ampex.
Well, one seemed different than the other two, but the other two, I just pick them. I don't have your ears.
You know, I'll tell you what I hear. Like with the third one, which is the Ampex, I can get into it more. Like I hear the sax, to me the sax sound is considerably better, and the cymbals are considerably better. And the bass is more, and yet the attack and it's also the way it gels together, like the kind of bounce of everything, the feel of everything musically, I like that better on 3. Also to me, subjectively, 3 feels more like what we sound like in a room playing together. You know, that's kind of why, you know, now I think this is a great recording to start with. I'm not gonna, you know, I'm really happy about this recording. So I think, you know, it's still gonna be a great recording, whatever you record it to. But, you know, when the time came to kind of make the choice, over time I felt the Studer, especially with the bright cymbals that Al Foster is playing, I felt that was a little exaggerated, and I felt the Ampex, like the bass had more bloom and just sounded kind of nicer, and also the horn felt like smoother, more dynamic, just kind of like more. To me there was a bigger ease about it, you know. So that's that. Yes.
Which model Studer did you say was that? 820?
820.
Okay, and so do you think that richness we're hearing from the Ampex is just the tube electronics? Could it be that simple? I mean, I don't know.
I think this, 820 has got a lot of solid state ICs type things. 820 is objectively got the nicer transport. Like if you were going to look at the numbers, it's probably the nicer transport of the two. So I think we're hearing the electronics. And I think, you know, those tube electronics are really good. And I think they're really clean too. Like the thing I'd like to say is like, I don't think that's more colored. I actually think that's more correct. But that's my, you know, that's how I hear it.
That's good point. Coming from the person who played on it.
Like, I feel that sounds more like us playing in the room. Now, somebody earlier was
Get that to compare to the other 3, by the way.
yeah, sure.
I was splitting hairs between 2 and 3, I thought, but yeah.
Well, I also think there's a big divide. There's like 1 on one hand and 2 and 3 on the other hand. As soon as you go to tape, you're already in much better shape.
Well, I have an Ampex and a Studer, so I hear the arguments both ways. So.
Yeah, but like going to tape, that's like a fundamental thing. And also, it's not completely a fair comparison because right now we're hearing everything at 96 digitized. If you're actually going from the tape directly, you know, if you were to play the tape versus the digital, if we had a tape recorder here and I put up the tapes, it's even more of a difference. So right now, the difference, like we're going through the same converters and everything, but like, if anything, this should help the digital because the digital is the thing that's playing natively here. Like the tape is already being digitized, which makes it sound not as good as you know.
Digitized?
No, the digital is straight up like that's what was recorded. No manipulations, nothing. If anything, the digital has the cleanest signal pass here. And the tape still wins. And if we were to put up the tape itself, it would be a much clearer thing still. You know. So then yeah, you can argue about the Studer versus the Ampex. You know, I like the Studer and I like some of what it does. And every record that we do, we make the comparison. And sometimes it's like, wow, you know, the Studer really does sound nice in some ways. But usually I go back, I listen more, and overall, I still prefer the Ampex. But could I make a record on the Studer? Yes, absolutely. If the Ampex crapped out, would I put out the Studer? Yes, absolutely, you know.
While we're shoving angels onto the top head of that thing, did you ever consider doing something esoteric like MR70 electronics versus 351, or is it just a resource? I mean, I know it's insane, but I was just curious if it ever.
Well, it's not super practical because, you know, first you have to get those electronics, then those electronics want a different type of head than the Ampex 51. Like the Ampex 51s, there are like all high inductance heads. Like I believe the MR70 wants to see low inductance heads. So we'd have to change heads. Now I already got a I had a set of heads from Flux made for the Ampex. That's $3,000 just for the heads. And now the guy doesn't make them anymore. So, you know, I think that's not going to be possible.
But you have to like have a relationship with that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, and then I have yet to hear MR70 electronics. So they have an amazing reputation. I'd be really curious to hear them. I'm not 100% sure without hearing them that they would be even better than the Ampex. I'd like to hear it and make the comparison. And it is interesting. Now, what's tempting about the MR70 electronics is like you could pair that, because they're low inductance, I think, you could pair that with an ATR 102 or a Studer transport. And then you'd have the better transport and the tube electronics. So yes, the thought has crossed our minds. But like, you know, there's only so much we can do right now. So
Not cheap.
yeah, it'd be a massive project. You know, people have done that.
It's just insanity, basically.
No, it'd be cool to do. People have done it on the playback side. I don't know that people have done it on the record side.
I heard some at the show about a year ago, and stunning. ATR 102 transport, MR70.
But for playback, right?
Just for playback, yes.
No, I know that exists.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that. Yes?
For the best of the best, I'd love to hear you play live.
A few years ago, I did this little experiment where, which is what I was kind of rehearsing when at the beginning of this, where for the Munich show, I was kind of sponsored at the time by like two hi-fi brands, Dardziel and Stenheim, and they flew me over, and they basically, a friend, François Saint-Géron from Paris, who has a shop called Mighty Sound, asked me to do a special event. And basically what we came up with was do a custom recording of backing tracks that I would play along with live. And so we did that. I went into the studio and I had my band from a record called No Filter, which is a record we did in 2018. I had the same band on the record and I played along with everybody. But for that, we had to be in booth because the purpose was make a backing track. So we all played and then took out the saxophone and we left the bass, the guitar, and the drums. And then we mixed that and used that to make backing tracks that I then played along with, just to kind of experiment and see if like a high-end system with me playing along, could that convincingly give the illusion of a band playing live. So that was kind of the premise of that whole thing. I'm gonna do it again here, and you know, you tell me what you think, you know. So I don't know, does anybody remember where we had the volume for this when we did that? Yeah, I think it was pretty cranked up. Yeah, it was somewhere in there. So what am I gonna do? Let's do heart. Okay. So this is a song that's on that record, and it's one of mine, and it's called Heart. And this is Greg Toohey on guitar, Joe Martin on bass, and Kush Abadi on drums. Yeah.
Too much?
Yeah, so how did that sound?
It's pretty good. You sounded great. You were more dynamic than the rest of the guys.
Sure. Sure. I mean, you know, it was kind of like a fun thing to do, you know, and sometimes it can be pretty convincing, or at least like, you know, enough that you're like, well, I just, you know, recorded music isn't so bad after all. But yeah, I mean, also I think in a way it's like a reality check, like how, you know, how close does the stuff really get? And in a way it's like, well, nothing is going to replace the live thing. And no matter what, how many efforts we make, and you know, I really strive to make the best recordings I can, because I believe in that, and I believe that if you do it a certain way, like you can really kind of get the emotion and the feel and the beauty of live music. You can at least get some of that, and enough that like people in the audience can relate to it and can really enjoy it. So I believe in that, but still, is it ever going to be as great as, you know, a great gig that you go to? No, I don't think it's going to be, especially with this music. But
Could you play a few minutes of the recording with you on the recording?
it's a different recording, actually. So no, I don't have that handy. I'm sorry.
Think about what you're listening to. It really makes you think, listening to this exercise.
Yeah.
What's real, what isn't real, and I mean,
Yeah.
the sense that you were right here, that always came across.
Yeah.
The distance between us,
Yeah.
the air coming out of the bell of your horn,
Yeah.
you felt it.
Yeah. And it's like, with like a, you know, this is a game in a way where like the more powerful the system, like having a system that can kind of deliver that kind of power and that kind of dynamic, which not a lot of systems can. And we kind of made it for like this Munich thing where they had like those big Stenheim speakers and like big solid state amps, like the Dart Zeal, like can really kind of do that. So that was kind of like a thing we also made to showcase the ability of their system to do that. So it, you know, I can't really tell how this was coming off because I'm here. So it's like I don't have a very good vantage point. And part of the difficulty of this exercise is also it's hard for me to gauge the relative volumes of things. And in a way, in a perfect world, I'd probably have put myself a little back, but I couldn't because there was this stuff was here, and I don't want to go all the way back there, you know. So, you know, we didn't really try to optimize this the way we did it in Munich, where we spent like 45 minutes figuring out exactly the volume and the spot in the room where I should stand and all that kind of stuff. So this can also be done better. But yeah, it's you know, it does make you think.
I think the room is a little wide,
Yeah.
so I think that actually added to the fact that it just.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it also shows you that the room has a big effect on things because you're playing this is pretty loud now. I'm playing, it's kind of, you know, it's loud or pretty loud. And you're gonna, like the sound of this room is going to affect the perception of things, which is a big thing when we listen to music. Like, whatever, you could have the best systems in the best system in the world. If you have it in a kind of not good sounding room, it's never going to sound that great. Yeah. And the recording is even more because you're getting that onto the tape. So
The thing is, and you can't undo this, or you can't unknow this, we knew you were standing here.
right. Yeah.
I recall when I first moved to the Bay Area back in the late 80s, and I used to go up to Yoshi's when they were in Oakland. And that room, unfortunately, the bass was just insane.
Yeah.
Similar, it wasn't much bigger or smaller. I mean, yes, the ceiling is a lot higher here, which has a big impact. But yeah, that's the thing. You go to a live performance of a big orchestra, classical music, your eyes are busy taking in what's going on too.
Yeah.
Because you get to focus on every section of the orchestra and all. So if you close your eyes, as I have a habit of doing late in the evening and turning all the lights off, listening to the music, then I get a different kind of a focus. So.
Yeah, and certain, you know, there's always great jazz recordings made at the Village Vanguard in New York, which still exists and which is my favorite club in the world. And I got to play a week there a while back with Paul Motion, which was like a big thing for me. And I go hear music often there. And I think there's a reason why it's such, you know, all these recordings are so iconic, like Train at the Vanguard or Bill Evans at the Vanguard and Joe Henderson at the Vanguard and all those great recordings. Like, that room sounds great. Like, it's kind of the perfect room to play jazz in. It's like small but not too small. It's got this weird triangle shape. It's kind of dry sounding. It's drier than you would think when you're playing. It's kind of dry, but not that dry that it's really a problem. It's actually dry in a way where you might have to push a little bit but you hear everything really well on stage. It feels really good. And I'm like, yeah, and so when you listen to those recordings, I think part of what you're getting is also kind of the magic of that room, you know.
How was it to play with Paul Motion?
It was amazing. It was really amazing.
For the Evans recording?
I mean, you know, Paul was in a really different place and he played much more open and he was kind of like a much more open drummer than he was when he played Bill's music. But we were playing some of his music, some of my music, and some standards, and like the overwhelming thing that I took from those gigs, because we did a week, so like, you know, Tuesday through Sunday, 2 sets a night, was the incredible musical intensity of everything he did and the level of musical rightness of everything he did. It was trio with Ben Monder, and he called it his new trio, which put a lot of pressure on us because, you know, he had the band with Lovano and Frizzell for like 20 years. And, you know, Ben and I think we did pretty well. Like I learned the music really well. I prepared for the gig as best I could. But Paul, everything he played had such an intent, and it was, okay, 2 things that I will say. It was much easier to play with him than I thought it might be. Like from the outside, sometimes I was like, okay, I love this, but like this might be kind of tricky to play to, because sometimes I wouldn't necessarily understand what he was doing from the outside. Once I was inside of it, it was crystal clear. Everything he was doing was so clear, the direction was so clear, the beat, even when he wasn't playing time per se, the implication of time was super strong, and so I knew exactly what direction to go in. It made me play better because he gave such a direction with everything he did. And then there was no dips in intensity. Like everything he did was at this level the whole week. And he was already sick. Like he passed away 2.5 months later. He had like some kind of quick bone cancer, and it killed him quickly. and he was already kind of sick, which I couldn't really tell, but he really played on an incredibly high level. And then I also felt this kind of really good vibe from him where I felt like he wanted me to play my best. And I felt he was going to try to hook it up so I could. And
What a great feeling.
yeah, God forbid I didn't want to play like Lovano because I love Lovano, but I'm like, that was one thing that I was thinking about is like, okay, whatever you make sure, don't try to sound like Joe Lovano, because that's not going to work. But like, so I was very mindful because of the context of trying to be me, even if that was going to fall short in some ways. That was one of my goals going into that gig. It was like, all right, I really got to play my shit and try to listen as best I can and try to be present in the moment as best I can. And I feel like he reacted to that and made it possible and easier for me to do that, which wasn't a given. So yeah, I mean that's something that was like a really important musical moment for me, for sure.
That's what's great about improvisational jazz is people are listening to each other
Yeah.
and reacting.
Yeah.
And as long as everybody, unlike being in booths and things like that.
Yeah, I mean it's like, and a lot of the old guys, like Paul was 80 when I played with him. I know he didn't like recording in booth, and he kind of shut it down when he could. I like because for the same reasons I'm talking about. And this wasn't it wasn't an audiophile thing. It was like, man, I just want to make music, and I just want to let the engineer figure the shit out and let us play in the same room. Which honestly is the way it should be. It's the engineer's job to like adapt and be able to get a good sound, but the music has to happen first. And I guess that's one of the goals of this label that I have with my friend Pete, is, I kind of now have a bit of a following in the audiophile thing, and that's been really helpful because, I'm grateful for it because if nobody buys these records, we can't make these records. And if they were digital, there's no way we could make these records. So I'm grateful for you all showing up and the people who buy the records and all that allows us to function. But it is music first. It's kind of like we're gonna try to record the best musicians we know, the best music we love and believe in, and we're gonna try to record it on the highest level with the aesthetic choices that we believe in. But it's got to be music first. Yeah. So with that, yes.
You brought some records to sell?
I do. I have a bunch of records over here. So this is like the stuff that's on display is stuff that I have. So I'll tell you what I have. This is vintage. This is with Kenny Barron, Joe Martin, and Jonathan Blake. That's the one that was done multi-track and then mixed to the Ampex. This is Chris Cheek's record. Chris is a saxophone player that I love, and I really wanted to record him. And this was also a chance to work with Bill Frisell. Bill Frisell is on this record. And this is Rudy Royston on drums and Tony Sher on bass. It's three originals by Chris, a piece by Purcell, a piece by Messiaen, and a piece by the Beatles. It's a pretty kind of wide-ranging thing. This has got I think I have the one steps of this with me. I'm not sure I have the regular. I have two test pressings for this, one-step test pressings. I still have one three-step test pressings of my record stand-up. And then I have my record stand-up, like plenty of copies. I don't know where they are, but they're somewhere. They're here. So that's this record. And that's the one that we did the one-step versus three-step on. And I have both one-step and three-step for this. Now, the one record I don't have with me is this one, but it's still, or do I? No, I don't. That's on the website. Like all this stuff is at analogtonefactory.com. But, if you want one, just come and see me, and I'm happy to sign it. For those of you who are into files, you can get the files on Bandcamp, or you can get the DSD on analogtonefactory.com. This isn't on DSD yet, but it should be in a few weeks. Say again?
What was the name of the album that you played?
The one that I played is this one, the one step. Yeah, that's this one. It's called Stand Up. Yeah.
The one you played live on was.
Oh, live on. So the one I played live on, the tune is on this record, Heart, but it's not the same band. So it's trio on this record with Joe Martin and Al Foster. So it's not really an apples to apples thing. Like the band, the record that I made was the band that I played live. That's called No Filter, but it doesn't have the song I played live on it. So it's a bit of a hybrid kind of thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it all complicated. Yes. So I'll be over here if anybody wants anything, and you know.
Start giving you money now?
You can start giving me money now. Yes, I'll take your money now. Like, are there any questions, or is there anything you want to talk about, or you know, before we wrap this up?
How often do you come to the West Coast?
You know, I haven't in a long time. I played a gig yesterday, and the venue owner reminded me that the last time I was here was 14 years ago. So I hope to not make it another 14 years before I come back. And yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try to come back more regularly. So.
Well, I want to thank Jerome Sabbagh.
Yeah.
Before everyone gets up, I'd like to get a picture of Jerome with your sax in front of the audience. I'm going to take it from behind.
So, yeah. And then I also want to take a picture of you next to some of those radios over there to get a nice shot. So,
Okay.
facing me.
Oh, what am I? I'm doing this. Okay.
Yeah, like this. And I'm going to put it wide angle. And, all right, if you want, raise your hands and clap for.
You know, I should have said, like, I only allow myself to be photographed by analog equipment, you know? Okay. No problem. Home is Brooklyn, New York, but I grew up in Paris, France. Yeah.
Oh, you grew up in Paris?
Yeah.
Where in Brooklyn?
Park Slope.
Where in Paris?
Yeah, 13th arrondissement, so the southeast.
So when you fly to every area, then you have to rent a car to do all these?
Well, the stuff in here, you know, I'm staying with Robert, and we're kind of going around and stuff. I'm flying to LA. My gig is in a club that's right by the airport. And then I'm getting picked up by some friends, and I'm staying with them in Laguna Beach. They're gonna take me around. So yeah, this is pretty easy. So.
Hasn't changed much.
But
Thanks.
thank you for coming.